it's made waves for understandable reasons. I mean, several reactions to this. One is that the context in which the army chief reportedly made these comments was at a closed, private, off-the-record event, and that's significant because I think that Pakistan and certainly the army chief, but Pakistan's leadership on the whole, would not want to ordinarily be seen making comments that would appear to be as aggressive as this, and that we've seen that the narrative from Pakistan, oh, this is not new, but since Operation Sindoor, Pakistan's position has been that it supports peace and that India is the aggressor, and so on. So to have these comments leaked out there indicating that the army chief has threatened some type of massive retaliation, including a potential nuclear response to India, hypothetically, clearly cuts against that narrative. And I think that's why it's important to note that he made these comments in a private setting with no intention, I assume, that his comments be made public. Two other quick observations on this. One is that he was making these threats in the context of India's decision to hold the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance, and in response to the possibility that India decides to build a dam following that decision. And I think in that sense, for the army chief to make a statement as strong as that and to issue that type of threat, I think it reflects just how concerned Pakistanis are across the board, including at the very top, about India's decision to hold the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. And it says something about just how concerned Pakistanis across the board are about that decision, which, of course, was one of a number of what I would describe as non-military punitive steps taken by India after the Pahalgam attack. But I think that this one stands out, the decision to hold the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance. It stands out for so many Pakistanis because of the seriousness of it. And the second point I'll make, of course, we're going by what comments were leaked out to the Indian media, but based on what the army chief seemed to suggest about Pakistan's threat to use nuclear weapons if it has to, it seems to reassert Pakistan's longtime position of rejecting a no first use policy when it comes to nuclear weapons. So I think that sort of stood out for me as well. But absolutely, pretty significant, and I could understand why these reported comments he made have gotten so much attention.
Because India also made the statement in response to that, and they said India has already made it clear that it will not give in to the nuclear blackmail. Your response to your observation to the Indian state?
Well, I think it was a predictable response. I think that India had to respond in some way, given how strong the comments were and the timing and who made them and so forth. And the response indicating that India won't give in to nuclear blackmail in Pakistan. I mean, this is of course the same message that we heard from Prime Minister Modi in a speech that he made soon after the conflict ended, when he was laying out what one could describe as a new doctrine. He made that statement as well. So I think that for India, it's important to not to just let this go and to put out its position that it won't be intimidated, and a response along those lines.
Talking about the trade, India and US, Donald Trump did raise 25% extra on the trade, the tariff which he earlier announced. What kind of implication do you think, and what's your observation regarding that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite striking that India, which is in principle a close partner of the U.S., was saddled with some of the highest tariffs of any country. India's neighbors, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and a few neighbors further afield in Southeast Asia had significantly lower tariffs. And I think that's significant for India's economic interests in the sense that, those countries, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, for that matter, these are all countries that are competitors with India when it comes to textile exports. And so this suggests that India could be disadvantaged if it doesn't adjust. I mean, I'm sure that India has already thought through workarounds. And, for example, I think it will be important for New Delhi to step up efforts to conclude new trade deals with other key export destinations such as the EU, and we know that there's been talks between India and the EU for quite some months. They're hoping to get a deal by the end of the year, and if so, or if things move closer to a deal in the next few months, that would suggest that India would be able to capture some market access elsewhere to allow it to reduce the potential damage that the Trump tariffs could pose for India. But absolutely, I think the economic implications are nothing to sneeze at. And what I mean by that is that they are significant just because, as we know, it's a very simple but important fact that for quite a few years, the U.S. has been a top destination for Indian exports.
This brings me to the last question. Trump is about to meet President Putin of Russia. And what kind of messaging, how do you look at the meeting, first of all? And second, what kind of impact it can have for the relations, and what kind of impact it can have for relations with India as well? Because the tariffs were imposed because, according to President Trump, India bought fuel from Russia. So do you think it will iron out few the tariffs, the implication of that?
Yeah, I think there's a very strong link potentially between this upcoming meeting between Trump and Putin and India's U.S. tariff situation. And I think this is really what appears to be the last-ditch effort made by President Trump to get Putin to agree to stop fighting, or at least to agree to a ceasefire. One of the reasons why I think Trump imposed this additional 25% tariff on India was to try to pressure Russia, trying to pressure Russia to stop fighting by trying to get Russia's most important commercial partners like India to stop importing goods from Russia. And so if there is an agreement that comes out of this meeting, if Putin does agree to a ceasefire or something close to it, I suspect that would take the heat off of India, in the sense that President Trump would not want to pressure India as much, and perhaps even potentially, if things hold, we could see this this latter 25% tariff, the one that was imposed on India because of its oil imports from Russia, being reduced or even melting away. It's very hard to predict how President Trump will act. He's very unconventional, but he clearly has injected geopolitical objectives into his economic policies, including his tariff decisions. So that's why I think that we do need to watch very carefully how these talks go between Trump and Putin, and if there is an outcome that leads to a ceasefire, I think that would benefit India across the board, not just in terms of its economic interests, but I think it's very clear that India has been calling for the war to wind down for quite some time. It has so many reasons for the war not to continue, and so in that sense, I think it would be a big benefit for India as well. I mean, we've seen, and this is not new, this has happened several times over the course of the war, Prime Minister Modi engaging with senior officials in both Russia and Ukraine. And one could assume that he delivered that message that he's been delivering for quite some time, and this is not an era of war. That could all help India. It could certainly help Trump's interests as well, but most importantly, it would help India's interests, because clearly India wants this war to end sooner rather than later.